Well, today's topic is on burls, and I wanted to show you the world's largest burl, but apparently it's a crime scene. But we're going to carry on because today I'm in Western Canada, about 500 miles north of Seattle, and today I wanted to show you the world's largest burl, but somebody has tried to burn this thing down, and you can see all the black on there. But we're going to carry on with this anyway, but before I do that, we're going to go back to the workshop so I can give you a background on burls. Well, and as you've already guessed, today's topic is all about burls. And I don't know which country, a number of them claim to have the largest burls, and I don't know exactly which country has the largest burl. But I do know that the one that we just photographed, the one that was lit on fire and the housing around it was burned down, they did catch a couple of culprits. They have charged them, and they will be heading to court in the near future, I'm told. Now, this is what it looked like before the fire, and you can see from this Wiki Commons picture, it's a pretty large burl. So anyway, let's get on with talking about burls today. So that piece that I was just showing you looks like a burl, but in fact these are called galls. And the reason for that, the differentiation is galls form around branches and burls will form around tree trunks. Now I haven't even cut into any of these. I found these all in a location about the size of 2 city blocks. These all seem to be grouped together for some reason. And I'm just going to take a moment. I've never cut into any of these, so I'm going to cut into one of them and we'll have a quick look at it, and then we'll move on to burls. So there's what the inside of a gall looks like. It's actually very similar to a burl, and it's almost like a little piece of wooden jewelry. I'm not quite sure what you could do with that, but that's what it looks like. Pretty fascinating. So burls come in all sorts of different sizes, and this was one that I found on a piece of firewood. Now I don't burn firewood anymore, but a few years ago when I did, I discovered this one, and I've hung on to it for this amount of time just because I wanted to use it in a video at some point. Now another one that I found in the same pile is this one, and this one is very fascinating, and if you look closely you can see inside this one, that's the bark. So the burl, and if you look on the outside, you can see how it's formed on the outside. The burl formed over top of the bark, and it looks like, I've counted the rings, it looks like there's about 12 rings that have formed over top of the bark and has preserved it inside. And it's just a fascinating way of one of the ways that burls can grow. And this is a small one. I will eventually cut this out and be able to use what's inside here. So burls get formed on tree trunks for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's disease, could be injury, mold, viruses that trees can contract, and they develop this bump on the side where the wood and or the bark sort of grows into. And most burls will have bark on the outside of them. Now, I haven't found that many of them. I found, I think, about 3 or 4 of them. And every one that I've found that I've been able to cut off, the burls have been weeping, almost like it was an injury of some kind in the sap. And if you look at these, you can see that they're still kind of shiny. And this is after a couple of years. They're still kind of shiny from the wound sort of weeping or sap coming out of the burl. Now, these are all covered with bark. Now, I've actually purchased some burls as well, and this is one of them, and it's dry. You can see how much I paid for it. And later on, I'm going to try and peel the bark off this one so that we can see what is underneath it. And I've saved that just for this video. You can see how rugged the bark is here. I'm probably going to lose a lot of the burl because you can see how thick the bark is here. So here's a tree, I believe this is a pine, and you can see that it's just encrusted with all sorts of little burls all up and down it. And I can't even show you the beginning and the end. I think it's 9 feet long. There's one end, and I don't think I can even maybe I can show you the bottom end. It's just encrusted all the way along. And later on, I'm going to ask you some ideas on what on earth I can do with burls like this. What can I do with a tree like this? Maybe you'll have some ideas for me. But before we get into that, let's have a look at what's inside a burl. Before we look at that, one thing I neglected to mention, when you're looking at burls or looking for burls, what you'll find is the biggest and the most frequent place of burls is underground, so underneath a tree as part of the root system. And when we look at the world's largest burl, I didn't even realize until I actually saw it in person, it was an underground burl, and you can see that by the roof. So let's go back and have another quick look at the world's largest burl. So as I talked about earlier, some of the largest burls are actually underground and they're associated with a root system. And I picked this side of this world's largest burl because you can see at the very top where it was cut off, but you can see underneath the massive burl that formed underneath the tree. It's just massive, but you can see the root structure. Now let's take a quick look inside some of these burls. And I'm going to start off with the three that I collected. These were off of poplar trees. And you can see that I've started, this one, the reason this looks like this is I've started to try and cut the bark off. This is very hard work. This has been 2 years it's been drying. But look at, I've actually planed the inside of it so you can see. Look at the gorgeous pattern, the swirls in there. And I'll do some close-ups later on at the end here. You'll be able to see close-ups of these. But just absolutely gorgeous wood inside. This is another one. It's a little bit bigger one, but again, you can see the swirling that goes on in there. And that's another poplar. And my last one is this largest poplar. And you can see again, it's all sorts of different patterns in there. If you look close, you'll see little holes, and that's common for burl to have holes, little holes in it, because the wood swirls and moves around. And the last one, the one that I purchased, I've actually just taken and planed that as well. And you can see that how lively it is in there as well. Different colors and of course all the different grain patterns in there. Now I'm going to take a moment now and see if I can get this bark off because this is very, very dry. So I'll see if I can do that. So there's what the underside of that bark, and you can see there's the bark, and basically I just hit it with a hammer on the edge and I was able to get it to break off, but it's probably half of the volume is in the bark, and this is what's left. It's quite a bit smaller, but what I wanted to show you was these little nubs on here. You can see those little nubs there. That is pretty common. Some burls are smooth on the inside, and most of them have sort of a prickly effect on the inside. And there, of course, is the inside, and that's the most coveted part, of course, of any burl. Well, now we come to the most important question. So what, Colin? What can we do with these, with burl wood? And as I've already talked about, if you're a wood turner, you can make bowls and other turned items. But when you're working with flat wood, you're making tables, you're making cabinetry, cupboards, boxes, those kinds of things. What on earth can you do with it? Well, as it turns out, you can purchase commercially from veneering companies. They find burls and cut them into veneers. And I was able to purchase this from some of my buddies at the Sunflower Woodworkers Guild near Wichita. One of the members was moving and selling up some of his woods and so on, and I was able to purchase this veneer from him. And this is one coat of Osmo, and this is the raw veneer. And it's a gorgeous kind of wood to work with. There'll be close-ups on Woodwork Web, the article, you'll be able to check that out. But all of the rest of this, what can we do with this? Well, I'm going to make some door pulls or drawer pulls, and that'll involve some hardening. That'll come up in a later video. But other than that, I'm kind of lost. I know we can do musical instrument makers use some for inlays and decoration on guitars and different kinds of instruments. But what other things can we do? And that's what I'm looking for your help on. This is the perfect forum to do that, because you guys come up with some great ideas. You know, what can I do with these burls? What kind of ideas? Because you can purchase burl wood, but when you do that, what kind of ideas do you have in mind for it? And we're all very interested to hear what kind of ideas. So put a note in the comment section of ideas, suggestions, things that we could do with burl wood, where we could use that to highlight existing projects that we're working on. So I'm all very fascinated to see what people come up with. You know, when I first spotted this, and it was actually laying on the ground, you can see it was broken off. I had to break off the other part of it. But when I first looked at it, I thought it looked just like a club. And I wondered if that's where the first cavemen got their ideas for clubs, was from something that came from a tree. It would be a pretty natural progression, I thought. Anyway, a number of months ago, I did a video on working with softwoods. And if you're new to woodworking and you're wanting to save some money and still practice your woodworking skills, using softwoods is a great way to go, because it helps you learn some of the techniques without spending a ton of money on things, and where softwoods are more valuable and where hardwoods are more valuable. So that concludes my video for today. I'm Colin Canet for Woodwork Web. Thanks for watching.